Chapter 18. The Price of Cucumbers. One night Scheherazade was asleep in the king's arms when his tightening, frightening grip woke her. "What's the matter, my lord?" "What story were you going to tell me this morning?" he said, "or promise to tell me tomorrow night?" The dust of sleep was still thick on the lady's thoughts, and she could not immediately summon up a story. "I have been watching you sleep," he said, "and thinking about the days and nights that have slipped by like earthworms through the earth since I married you. My brain instructed my heart, saying, 'She has tricked you night after night. She has fooled you, and you have enjoyed being fooled.' Can you dispute, wife, that you have saved your life by trickery, telling me stories that tempt me to listen rather than to kill?" Scheherazade did not answer. "You know that a man's mind is a palace whose occupants are his separate thoughts. The mind of a king must be larger than most, for there are 1,000 thoughts to be bedded down under one roof. What room is there for stories in such a palace? The chambers of my head are crammed with your stories, Scheherazade. They run about during the day, interrupting and tripping up my sober thoughts of state. Should a king's thoughts be cluttered with such light, fanciful matters? No." But Scheherazade did not answer. "I will not thank you for your stories, for they have been a deception, a device, a deceitful trick of yours to help you cling to your worthless and empty head. I must admire your cunning, Scheherazade, but such cunning is the very reason I must cut off your head." But Scheherazade did not answer. She only bowed to the king to show that she accepted his decision. "Do you deny that you have been tricking me all these nights?" "May Allah look away from me if I ever deny what my king and husband tells me is true." "Is that all you have to say?" exclaimed Shahryar. "Ah, my husband, I fear that if I speak, the first word of another story will fall from my mouth, for the palace of my mind is overflowing with such meddlesome, troublesome stories. They teach me that trickery is rife with the world, and that you are right, therefore, to beware of tricksters such as me. It is true that I enjoyed life, for every day was crowned with the sight of you, O Shahryar. But do not believe that I, a worthless and silly and slow-witted woman, thought I could cloud your eyes or deceive your heart. Allah forgive me. I only wished for the fate of the Arab who so foolishly tried to trick the Emir Mu'in ibn Zayd." "What fate was that?" Scheherazade stomped her foot. "Again, I have spilt a drop of story at your feet, my lord, like a careless dairymaid spilling the milk. Surely you don't want me to tell you how the trickster was out-tricked." "Oh, yes, my trickster wife," said Shahryar with a cold glitter in his eyes, "for it may teach me how to trick you out of your life this coming morning." Scheherazade wrapped the blanket of the bed around her head so that only her eyes were showing. Riding out into the desert one day, the Emir Mu'in ibn Zayd was dressed like this against the flying prickle of a sandstorm. Out of the whirling sand came a poor Arab mounted on a donkey, and, of course, they exchanged greetings. "Where are you going, sir?" asked the Emir. Now most men who are rich as the Emir was rich are too mean to squander precious words on men below them in rank. But Mu'in was quite the most generous, hospitable, and courageous believer ever to have graced Allah's Sahara. All this happened, of course, long before the reign of Shahryar of Sassan or Shahzaman of Samarkand. "Where are you going, sir?" was the Emir's question to the Arab. "I am going to the court of the Emir Mu'in ibn Zayd with these," said the Arab, who held up a small parcel. "What is in there? Something you wish to sell?" asked the Emir, intending to reveal himself immediately. The Arab winked. "A cunning man has no need to be so simple. You must know, sir, for everyone knows it, that the Emir Mu'in is quite the most generous, hospitable, and courteous believer ever to have been entrusted with money. A cunning man could make good use of such a man." Mu'in decided not to uncover his face, and again asked what was in the parcel. "Cucumbers, sir, the first baby cucumbers from my garden," replied the Arab. "I am taking them as a present to the Emir." "A present? Do you expect nothing in return for such generosity?" asked the Emir, guessing the reply. The Arab winked again and tapped his nose. "Expect? What might a man expect from the most generous, hospitable, and courteous believer who ever squandered money on the poor? He will ask me what kind of gift he could make in return for such trouble and effort and thoughtfulness on my part, and I shall think for a moment and say, 'What would you care to give me? 1,000 dinars? And if he does, I shall be the happiest man in the Sahara.'" "And what if he says no?" asked Mu'in, amazed at the Arab's impertinence. "I shall say 800 dinars, replied the Arab, "and if he gives me them, I shall be the happiest man in the region." And what if he says no to 800 dinars? 600 dinars. That would make me the happiest man in Utria, my hometown. And what if he says no to 600? 400 dinars. That would make my wife happy at least. And what if he says no to 400? Asked the emir. 200 dinars, replied the Arab, which would pay for a new donkey. And if he says no to that? Well, 100, and then 70, and then 40. But what if he says no to 40 dinars? Asked the emir. Then I shall throw my cucumbers on the rubbish heap, said the Arab, and say that the stories of Mu'in ibn Zaid were all lies, and curse my donkey for taking me there to waste my time on misers. Well, I hope your plan prospers, said Mu'in, safely grinning a grin behind the folds of his burnous. When the Arab was out of sight, the emir turned back to his court so as to entertain his guest without delay. He changed into his robes of cloth of gold, bordered with red velvet, and received his humble visitor in an audience chamber roofed with stippled silver. The Arab crept in, his pack of cucumbers folded to his chest, looking about him as the woolen tapestries and the sayings from the holy book inlaid in gold on the black lacquer furnishings and marble pillars. The emir's voice, ringing from the far end of the room, startled him. "The blessing of Allah be upon you, sir. What have I done to deserve the honor of a visit from—" The Arab supplied his name. "Ali ibn Ali, lord and master of all that floor which lies under the ceiling of the sky. I have travelled a day and a night from my little house in the province of Utria to bring you the first fruits of my garden. When I saw these baby cucumbers hanging among their yellow flower trumpets and green leaves, I said to myself, the Emir Mu'in ibn Zaid must have these if I have to travel a day and a night to give them to him." "How kind," said Mu'in, "to do such a selfless thing without thought of reward. You must indeed be the most generous, hospitable, and courteous believer ever to grace Allah's Sahara." No, indeed," simpered Ali. "I fall far short of the generosity, hospitality, and courtesy of the Emir ibn Zaid. For your fame has spread like the priceless carpet to the four corners of Arabia's floor." Mu'in took the cucumbers and looked at them thoughtfully, and then laid them back in the Arab's hands. "I cannot accept these delicate fruits unless you will allow me to reward your kindness in some way. But I ask my heart, and my heart confers with my stomach, and they cannot decide on the correct price for baby cucumbers so early in the season. What should an emir of great wealth give to a man as worthy as Ali ibn Ali?" 1,000 dinars, said the Arab, unable to mince matters for another moment. No, I shan't give you that, said Mu'in. No, of course not, master. What am I thinking of? 800 dinars. I could, but I shan't give you 800. Why should you indeed? Said Ali. 600. I shan't give you 600 dinars. No, sir, of course not, said Ali, his neck beginning to sweat. Would 400 dinars seem fair? No, Ali ibn Ali, not for baby cucumbers. 200 then? Not 200, Ali ibn Ali. 100. Yes, but I shan't give you 100 dinars. You could perhaps spare 70 dinars, though, said the Arab. I could, but I won't. 40 dinars for your humble servant. No, Ali ibn Ali, for that would insult you. Yes, sir, said Ali, getting up off his aching knees. It would insult me, as I would insult you if I had words enough in my ignorant head, but I curse the donkey that brought me here, and I will never believe again the stories of Mu'in ibn Zaid's generosity. And he shuffled off toward the door. But it would seem a waste of delectable baby cucumbers to throw them on the rubbish heap, would it not? Said the emir, rising from his throne. If you won't eat them yourself, perhaps you would give them to the Arab you met riding in the desert. Each of the emir's words sounded in the Arab's ears like the clanging of a prison door or the sharpening of an axe. He peeped back over his shoulder at Mu'in ibn Zaid, who had covered his head with a burnous so that only his eyes were showing. The Arab fell on his face where he was and trembled like a joint of meat that smells the cooking pot. Please don't lie on the cucumbers, friend Ali ibn Ali. We haven't decided on a fair price for them yet. A present has no price, mumbled Ali. Yours, all yours. But the emir insisted. Would you not agree, friend? The thoughts which moved you to come here do deserve some kind of reward. Ali the Arab covered his head with his arms. Let me see what I shall give you, said Mu'in. 1,000 dinars, you said. I replied that I would not give you 1,000. And he counted out 1,000 dinars onto a plate. And even though you asked me for a further 800 dinars, that was still insufficient to repay you for your thoughtfulness. And he counted 800 dinars onto the same plate. Not even the addition of another 600 dinars was enough to repay your generosity, nor was another 400 dinars enough to repay your courtesy. And if I add to it the 200, the 100, the 70, and the 40 dinars, by which you so modestly increased your estimate, I would still insult a truly generous man with a gift. And he counted out each of the sums, 400, 200, 100, 70, and 40, onto the plate. A man's thoughtfulness and selfless act of love cannot be repaid with this paltry sum of 3,210 dinars. Ali ibn Ali was beating his forehead on the floor as he waited to hear what reward awaited a greedy confidence trickster. But perhaps a scoundrel like Ali ibn Ali of Utria is not so easily insulted as an honest believer. And laughing, Mu'in ibn Zayd carried the plate to where Ali lay rigid on the floor and stood it beside his head. "But please don't lie on those cucumbers another moment, sir, for if there is one dish I relish, it is baby cucumbers. Won't you share them with me?" "And there's one dish I relish, sir," said the Arab, raising his face. "It is that one," and he nodded towards the plate of dinars the Emir had given him. "May Allah bless you for your generosity, hospitality, and courtesy, but chiefly for your sense of humor, O Emir Mu'in ibn Zayd." When Scheherazade finished the story called The Price of Cucumbers, her husband was free to cut off her head, for the sun was straining its neck to see over the horizon. But given the admirable example of Mu'in ibn Zayd's generous dealings with the Arab, Shahryar could not immediately and peevishly condemn her to death. Besides, his anger had soaked away while she spoke, as the angry wave bubbles on the sand's surface for a moment and then soaks into the soft and shifting gold and leaves only a dark, cold trace of its shape. The dark, cold trace of Shahryar's bitterness still lay over Scheherazade, but she lived to tell another tale on the 613th night after her wedding. Chapter 19, The Wonderful Bag. On the 666th night, Scheherazade told a story, told to her, of a man whose name was too unimportant to remember, but who told his story to others in these words. "I was looking after my stall in the Baghdad bazaar when an Arab with eyes as sharp as spears and fingers as sticky as a tree frog's boldly lifted a bag off the counter and walked away with it. 'Put that back, you son of a blue bottle's maggot,' I said, 'or I shall have you taken before the wali and he'll cut off your hands.' 'Hold your tongue, you reminder of a molting duck,' he replied calmly over his shoulder. 'This bag's mine.' 'It's no more yours than the caliph's left ear,' I cried, pursuing him down the street. 'Put it back at once, you flea on a cockroach's kneecap.' In brief, I called on the neighboring stall-holders for help. They seized the Arab and carried him to the wali's court, where the bag was placed on the judge's bench. 'There is a simple way of solving this matter,' said the wali. 'The true owner will certainly know what the bag contains.' 'Why, then the matter is solved,' said the Arab, 'for I can tell you down to the last item what is in the bag. There is a knife, a fork, a spoon, 3 figs, a bottle of milk, 4 cheeses, a book, a camel-driver's whip, and a flag.' 'But that's quite absurd,' I said, curling my lip at the Arab. 'I know full well the bag contains a box of chalks, 4 dates, a twist of sherbet, 2 daggers, 412 dinars, a mirror set with zircon, a pair of clogs, and some seaweed.' 'You did not give me time to finish,' said the Arab, flaring his nostrils at me. 'I did not mention the saddle, the 3 lamps, the small pond, the laundry basket, and the carved chair.' 'Your interruption proves that you have no more manners than honesty,' I said, grabbing a finger towards the Arab. 'As I was saying, there are 5 ducks, a candlestick, 8 turbans, 74 ostrich eggs, my mother-in-law's left leg, a compact tent, and 1 whirling dervish.' 'Do you expect the judge to believe such a monumental lie?' said the Arab, shaking his fist at me across the court. 'His eyes will shortly prove that the only contents I have yet to mention are the 6 red camels, the chief of police, a gatehouse from Cairo's eastern wall, a platoon of horse, and 16 small volcanoes, and of course a troop of scantily dressed dancing girls.' We glowered at one another across the court, and I said, 'I trust only in Allah, and the evidence of those 24 just sheiks in the bag, and the waiters who serve them their meals in there, along with the 7 moonlit gardens, 68.5 palaces, the pregnant ox, the snow-covered mountain range, and the modest quarter section of the Sahara Desert. I think that leaves only the Red Ocean and 12 of its beaches unlisted.' At this point, the Wali closed his gaping mouth and opened the wonderful bag, shaking out onto the bench some old pieces of orange peel and 3 pips. There was a great silence in the courtroom. "I really must apologize from the lowest rib of my chest," said the Arab, bowing to me across the court. "I seem to have made the most unfortunate mistake. This is not my bag at all. Can you forgive me the inconvenience you have been caused?" "Do I not know as well as anyone here," I said, returning the bow, "how easily the mistake is made? I, too, mistook this bag for my own. I hope you will forgive me for treating you so barbarously in my ignorance." "Think nothing of it, friend," said the Arab, and we left the courtroom arm in arm, leaving the Wali to scratch his head and dispose of the orange peel, the 3 pips, and the wonderful bag. Chapter 21. The Prince and the Large and Lonely Tortoise. "Allah's ways of pairing a man and a woman are many," said the king of Inner Araby to his 3 sons, "and pure chance is as good as any. Fetch your bows and arrows and meet me on the balcony in less time than it takes the heart to fall in love." So the princes of Inner Araby met their father on the palace balcony, and there he instructed each one to fire an arrow high over the city below. "Wherever your arrow falls, on whatever house, a bride will be taken for you from under that roof." The oldest prince's arrow fell on the house of a wealthy merchant whose eldest daughter was as beautiful as the ash tree by moonlight. Everyone was well pleased. The second prince shot an arrow which fell on the house of a respected and respectable sheik, whose only daughter was as beautiful as the larch tree in sunlight. Everyone was well pleased. But when the youngest prince, the king's favorite son, fired his arrow over the city, it fell among the thatches and tiles onto a wholly unremarkable house occupied by no one but a large and lonely tortoise. "Shoot again," said the king, as hurriedly as a cat climbs out of the water. "Allah has made a slight mistake." But the second arrow fell on the self-same house. "Shoot again," said the king, as hurriedly as a cat climbs out of the fire. "Allah has made a terrible mistake." But the third arrow fell on the very same house, to the excitement of the large and lonely tortoise inside. "Either tell me the king's wishes or stop shooting arrows into my roof," she said, as the foot pages arrived with ladders to retrieve the third arrow. "Clearly Allah intends you never to marry," said the king to his son, overcome with sadness. "Far from it, father," said the youngest prince. "Allah clearly intends me to marry this large and lonely tortoise, and I will not defy heaven's decision." So the tortoise was fetched to the royal palace on a large red cushion by 4 liveried foot pages. She was a very ancient, repulsive tortoise who mumbled her food to pieces between lips as hard and toothless as the rims of stone jars. "Allah cannot expect a man to marry that," said the king, bursting into tears. "Think of the bed linen." At this the tortoise retreated into her shell, and out of courtesy the young prince went forward and exchanged a few words with her, looking in at the neck of the shell. "I am certain more than ever," he said, returning to the king, "I must marry this large and lonely tortoise, and if I am a just and gentle husband, I am sure I shall be rewarded with a loyal and gentle wife." The wedding of the 3 princes took place on the same day, the oldest to the merchant's daughter, who wore a crimson and gold robe, the second to the sheik's daughter, who wore white and silver, the youngest to the large and lonely tortoise, who wore a purple bow around her neck. The apple of the king's heart rotted to its core, and he cursed his idea of the fateful arrows. When his young son patiently accepted his bride and lived in apparent peace and cheerfulness with her, the king took it upon himself to grieve on the boy's behalf. His inward sighs clouded the windows of his eyes, and soon he was gravely ill and almost blind. His 3 loving sons were anxious and doubtful of the quackery and magic practiced by the royal physicians. "Father," they said, "from today onwards our wives alone will feed and nurse you, for their love is to be trusted better than your lazy and ignorant doctors. By turns the ladies will prepare you meals to tempt your appetite and renew your strength." At once the royal princesses set about preparing tasty broths to delight the sickly king. "Here is an opportunity," said the royal ladies, "to shame the detestable animal that married the stupid young prince. Perhaps when she lays some foul-tasting concoction in front of the king, he will send her back to where she came from, or spit and roast her over an open fire." Then the large and lonely tortoise sent a maid to the palace of her sister-in-law, the merchant's daughter, saying, "May I have all the grease from your kitchen ceilings and dust from under your carpet to flavor the king's soup?" The merchant's daughter curled her lip with disgust. "That's just what I would expect from that creature," she said. "Tell it I have every need of every drop of grease and speck of dust for my own cooking, and it must make do with its own household dirt." And she laughed contemptuously. Then the Tortoise sent a maid to her other sister-in-law, the Sheik's daughter, saying, "May I have all the dead mice from your traps and the used straw from your stables to flavor the king's broth?" "Typical," said her sister-in-law. "I can hardly be bothered with sending a reply. Tell that beast that royal mice are too good for her sort, even when they are dead." When the maid brought back the messages, the Tortoise, far from being angry, was spun about by laughter, and she rolled on the rim of her shell like a coin spinning to rest. For breakfast the next morning, the merchant's daughter brought a steaming bowl of broth covered with a linen cloth and offered it to the king on a silver tray. "Here, father, I prepared this with my own hands from the very best herbs, spices, honey, and fruit." But when the king lifted the linen cloth, the greasy gray swill in the bowl, all coated in fluff, was enough to make him turn green. "I don't understand," began the princess, but the king had already fainted. By midday he had recovered enough to be offered food by the second princess. She brought him a bowl of broth covered with a linen cloth, and presented it to him on a golden tray. "Here, father, I have prepared this with my own hands from the very rarest herbs and spices with the leanest of meat." "Are you all trying to poison me?" the king exclaimed, for before he even lifted the linen, the smell was utterly appalling, and when he did so, 3 dead mice and a handful of dirty straw were floating in a milky swill. "I don't understand," began the princess, spilling the bowl all over the bed. The king fell back on his pillow in a dead faint, and was not well enough to receive anyone until the evening. When the large, lonely, but royal Tortoise crawled into the king's bedroom with a bowl of broth balanced on top of her shell, the king turned his face into his pillow and groaned. "What mess have you mixed me with your horny left foot?" he asked disgustedly. But when he caught a scent of the Tortoise's broth, it so delighted his taste buds that the juices flowed in his old mouth like sweet water into a dry riverbed. 1 mouthful, and the warmth came back to his skin. 2 mouthfuls, and his brittle old bones flexed amidst their plated muscles. 3 mouthfuls, and his brain drew back the curtains on his eyes to see what deliciousness was restoring him to health by the spoonful. Day by day the king's health and eyesight were restored by the Tortoise's food, and by knowing that the young prince had at least married a wife who could cook. Still he shuddered to see the huge mound of tortoise shell heaving around the palace corridors, or mumbling a lettuce on the palace lawn. Although the 2 lady princesses could not understand what had happened to their cooking, they felt that the tortoise was in some way to blame, and their loathing for her grew. To celebrate his recovery, the king invited his family to a grand dinner. He gave orders that the guests should wear their most glorious clothes and arrive, as ships sail into port, to much waving of hands and cheering of crowds. "I shall arrive on a foam-white horse with a golden mane and tail," said the merchant's daughter, "seated on a saddle of red leather with silver stirrups and red ribbon reins, and I shall humiliate that grotesque sister of ours." "And I shall arrive on an ebony black stallion with white starred ankles," said the sheik's daughter, "seated on a saddle of yellow leather with brass stirrups and copper-corded reins. I'll shame that 4-footed sister of ours for being so ugly." The sister-in-law in question sent word to them, asking first one for the loan of a goose, then the other for loan of a goat on which she could arrive at the party. Their answers were so rude that the Tortoise drew her head into her shell to hide her blushes, but then she laughed and rolled about on the rim of her shell like a plate spinning to rest on a floor. In the palace dining hall, trumpets sounded to welcome the 3 princesses, and all eyes turned towards the great oak doors which swung open grandly. From the farthest end of the corridor, a shriek was followed by a rhythmic slapping on the stone floor. A moment later, a huge goose, as large as a baby ruck, flapped into the hall at a gallop, the merchant's daughter clinging to its neck and screaming so much that the poor bird grew all the more excited and flapped its wings, smothering the princess in loose feathers. The goose was closely followed by a small tiptoeing goat, jutting its beard and tossing its horns in disdain at the great weight of its rider. The sheik's daughter ran to keep her feet from dragging along the floor, and the goat's hind hooves tore through the hem of her white robe. The 2 animals deposited the princesses in a heap at the king's feet, and ran out again. Slap, trap, tap, tap, tap. "Are you trying to shame my sons, your husbands?" demanded the king. But his daughters-in-law had not the breath to explain that they had left home on a golden palomino and an ebony black stallion. As the eldest began to pant out an apology, the whole room fell silent at the sound of the 3rd princess coming. Some covered their faces with napkins, some tried to sit with their backs to the door so as not to see. A little foot-page came in under the weight of a large red cushion. On it lay the tortoise shell, but the sun shone through the leg holes and out through the neck hole. It was unoccupied. The king's mouth gaped at the very prospect of a naked tortoise lumbering in through the doors, but his amazement doubled when a horse, white as elder-flowers and dappled with elderberry black, carried bareback into the room a lady whose beauty flamed like the sun's burning corona. Her unplaited hair cascaded over the horse's flanks like dark water breaking over a rock. Her eyes were as black as an eclipse and fringed like the tapestries of Iram. The youngest prince, showing no surprise at all, went forward, lifted his wife down from the horse, and seated her at table opposite the king. "Are you trying to kill an old man?" said the king, clutching his favorite son's hand. "My creaking heart aches at the sight of such unexpected beauty. I would have given half my kingdom to see you married to a bride like this. Explain, or I shall burst with impatience." "Calm yourself, father," said the prince. "If you remember, I spoke words with the tortoise when she was first brought to the palace. I leaned down to the neck of her shell and saw inside this moonrise of a lady. But until today I have not had her permission to show the world my undeserved treasure. Only in the privacy of our own palace and the candlelight of our own bedroom has a lady Tortoise shown herself to me in this shape." The lady Tortoise said, "I find that I can judge the true worth of a person so much better on first acquaintance when they think they are meeting a large and lonely tortoise. Can you wonder that I loved your noble third son at our very first meeting? But I must apologize. I was as slow as a tortoise in preparing myself for this happy celebration. I have left my hair unplaited and undecorated." And she picked up the bowl of green pea soup that stood in front of her and tipped it over her head. As it fell, the drops of soup changed into sea-green emeralds, which spangled in her hair and lodged in every fold of her gown. With one breath, the assembled guests gasped their admiration. But the two princesses, livid that all eyes were not on them, and bruised in both bottom and pride after their undignified arrival, sniffed haughtily and snarled angrily. "Hocus pocus," said one. "Stuff and nonsense," said the other. "Nothing to it," said one. "Easy as winking," said the other. And both ladies picked up their pea-green soup and tipped it over their hair. The soup squelched through to their scalps, ran down their foreheads, and dripped off their noses. Lentils and squashed peas slid down each hair and dropped it in the necks of their dresses. The king laughed, and the princes laughed, and the lady Tortoise laughed. And then she presented her two jealous sisters with the empty tortoise shell, to remind them in the future of what loveliness can often be found under a humble exterior, and how ugly jealousy can make a woman.